the Cybersecurity and Compliance Podcast with Craig Petronella. Learn about the most current IT security threats in ransomware, phishing, business email compromise, cybercrime tactics, cyber heist schemes, social engineering scams, as well as hints and tips from leading professionals to help you prevent hackers from penetrating your network and dropping ransomware or malware payloads. This podcast will arm you with the best info to defend your network against the latest cyber crimes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, here's your host, Craig Petronella.
Hey guys, welcome to another podcast. We got Blake Ray.
Hello, everybody. We're back.
We're going to do a news highlight. Blake, you had a couple that caught your interest.
Yeah, I think the SolarWinds. If you thought we were done talking about SolarWinds, there's more updates. So I found it pretty funny. Well, I wouldn't say funny, but ironic. So the SEC is suing SolarWinds, alleging fraud and weak cybersecurity.
So for the people listening, what is SolarWinds? Just a quick rundown.
So SolarWinds essentially is an information technology firm. Back in 2019, they were attacked by a Russian-backed cybersecurity group. So yeah, essentially it's just a huge IT provider. And the chief information security officer, essentially the SEC was kind of targeting him. But yeah, it's a huge IT company.
Yeah, so just kind of give a little more depth to our listeners. So it's a piece of software that a lot of government, defense, as well as commercial will use to manage updates, patches on their endpoints and things like that. Has other capabilities, but in a nutshell, it's an agent, right? It's a software agent. So basically the hackers were like, hey, if we attack this company, this particular vendor, they've got thousands of people that use this SolarWinds software agent. So it'll infect all those people all in one shot. So that's really what happened in the breach. And then what happened recently with the SEC charges is that even though they lost a lot of their credibility and their trust because they're an IT company and they were breached, it just goes to show that, what was that, 2019, I think you said? They had, 4 years ago now? They still have not improved their cybersecurity to bolster themselves and take it seriously. And then the CISO apparently got charged from the SEC after there was an investigation, or maybe the investigation's ongoing, around how there's possible misleading of investors around cybersecurity. I think that's
they overstated their cybersecurity practices and they understated their known vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so this goes back to what we've been preaching for a really long time now. You can't trust, sadly, anyone. Trustless, right? We keep hammering that home. Had there been some type of third party that has to check them, and make sure, and then put a report out. I mean, I don't think that's such a bad idea especially for publicly traded companies to be audited like that, by a third party. And this is, kind of brings us fast forward to CMMC and why everything's evidence-based and everything has to get audited and all those controls have to get checked, by a third party and make sure that everything's being done properly. And there's no fudging anymore. And that's kind of the point. But the stark reality, or the learning lesson, I guess, in this is just because you have a vendor that might look good on the surface, if you don't do your own due diligence and risk on them, they may be an open window or a gap in your system, to potentially have a breach for, to rope you into things.
Yeah, I mean, this is making headlines pretty much everywhere. When we were looking through the news to talk about on today, I mean, people just repeatedly, different huge outlets are loving to talk about this one.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like I feel like the story is just kind of almost like mind numbing. It's like I don't know, just my perspective. I feel like the headlines and it's almost like noisy, right? Like it's just happening so much. I think people are just almost overstimulated with all this stuff, and it's just like, well, okay, here's another headline. What do we do now? And I think the takeaway is audit your vendors, audit your third parties that you're doing business with, and push back on them, push back on the vendors for their security, ask them for proof and evidence of various standards. You can go as high as SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO 27001 and some of the derivatives. Those are kind of like the gold standards. But small businesses, they're not going to be able to afford that. But there's still some questions that you as customers of these companies can put pressure on these vendors. I feel like if the public puts more and more pressure, into more of a trustless model that don't trust but verify, I think that's going to be, good for all of us.
yeah. Another one that stuck out for me is the Canadian government apparently banned WeChat and Kaspersky on any government focused apps. I mean, I think I'm surprised they're just getting around to it now. In all honesty, I mean, I think the US government had banned WeChat years ago. Obviously Kaspersky is Russian antivirus software, which is probably, I mean, they were a lot more popular back in the day than they are now, but yeah, I'm surprised it took so long for that to happen.
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about in our last podcast around, DJI was under the microscope and still is. And, we talked to our listeners and we were like, look, kind of go through all your apps and your software on your phones and your endpoints. You'd be really surprised if you actually did that and went through all the stuff on your devices to see where it is. And quite frankly, I would not be surprised if there were one or more apps that were kind of gray or shady, in my opinion, around, where are they developed, what country are they coming from. And I think that's the big takeaway with this. I think it's if you've got apps that are in a country that at the current landscape and climate is either hostile or considered an adversary, I mean, it's a big risk for you having that on your phone because you have to assume the worst. You have to assume that, oh, this app's spying on me. It's kind of like you have to put the layers in place and assume that everything is your camera, your microphone's being turned on without your knowledge or consent. So what are you doing to prevent that stuff? So you either make the choice to uninstall the app if you're on an iPhone or another device that has controls where you can limit. That's obviously, limit location services, limit the usage, or only allow the app to ask for permission on when can we use the microphone, when can we use the camera, physical safeguards, put tape over the cameras, or, cover them up. It's just crazy, all of the stuff that we as consumers have to look out for. But I think it's awareness. It's you're making your job a lot harder if you have hundreds of apps on your devices is really the bottom line here. So try to simmer it down, try to go through an exercise and regularly check these things, especially if you're in a regulated industry or you're a defense industrial based contractor. But even at the consumer level, like, with the WeChat, we talked about TikTok. We talked about, what was the other one? It was TikTok. Oh, we talked about Meta and the lawsuit, 41 states banding together and suing Meta about unfair practices towards minors and children, purposely creating addictive products. I mean, it's just crazy that I don't know. It's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously anything TikTok is huge. Like, seems like the
I don't
younger
know why
generation.
I don't know. I guess that maybe I don't know why it's huge though. Like YouTube has shorts, which isn't short similar to TikTok. I don't know what the difference is. I guess
I've never used TikTok. I've never even had
but
TikTok.
isn't the whole point of TikTok like short video clips?
Yes,
Isn't that
short format videos?
Right. So I think YouTube's answer was shorts. They
Instagram?
call it shorts.
Instagram has shorts.
Right. But like, why? Like, I don't understand why. Like, why so much gravitation toward it? It's kind of like I guess the Twitter thing. Like, there was the character limit with Twitter, and then there was just explosive growth at that time. It was just kind of weird how like some of these platforms just explode like that. In my opinion, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you would think like I think TikTok did it first, right? Like with the short format video, and then Instagram rolled out their shorts, and then YouTube rolled out their shorts or whatever, the reels, whatever they call them. So I think the fact that TikTok did it first, and then these other, but you would think like people would want to consolidate their app usage, like to see the same shorts from Instagram, for example, the reels, like you're going to TikTok to see the same content. I just don't understand.
yeah, I don't know. Does TikTok do like pay-per-click ad revenue models as well?
Yeah. I mean, they're all pretty much trying to fight for the same.
Because I know
customers,
that Google posted that their stuff was down big time as far as ad revenue and people using online, advertising through pay-per-click and stuff like that.
I find that hard to believe because so through the Google Ads Manager, I mean, you're running ads on YouTube. I mean, you're running ads on their Google Ads network, which essentially Google allows users like web admins to put little generic banners. So essentially, then Google will feed a banner to it or an ad, depending on the dynamic network that the user or the audience finds interesting. So, and then they pay those web admins for that space.
Right.
So I find it kind of interesting that they would say ad revenue is down.
Yeah, I think that was the last that I saw anyway. Just trying to see if there's any other. I know that there's this huge Move It ransomware. We talked about that a little bit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And then there's also the Android spyware that's tracking almost like the Pegasus.
Speaking of ads, I saw the malvertising. Did you see that one? So
Mm-mm.
people that are downloading malware through ads now. So like ads are delivering.
I talked about that many years ago, but I haven't seen recent press around it.
Yeah, I just saw the headline, but I didn't read too much about it. Um, but essentially, malware distributors and architects are essentially serving up ads to their
Well, I know
audience.
what would happen in the past was these malicious actors would buy legitimate ads, get them approved, and then swap the content on the web server to have an
Yeah,
infection.
one of them's been targeting like a payment platform, like a Brazilian payment platform that I was reading. But yeah, essentially the malware ads are being placed in advertising sections of search results. And then whenever they click on it, they'll be redirected to like a cloaking service. So it'll filter obviously any type of, they'll have some type of like click cease or some type of technology like that filters out any type of bot traffic. And then yeah, I mean, essentially it'll look like their banking software or something. I don't know how people
Oh,
fall
that's
for this,
crazy.
but
The other
yeah.
the other one I saw was the FTC put out some new guidelines for car dealerships, automotive dealerships. You see that?
I saw you sent the link, but I didn't get a chance to read it.
Yeah, so basically, in a nutshell, there's a new extension to the FTC where they're requiring the car dealerships to use encryption more heavily, specifically adopting encrypted messaging tools and hard drives. So I know we've got some clients that fall into that bucket, and I've sent out some emails to talk about that. But we talked months, if not years now, about how it's just every day is going to be some new regulation. And my hope is that, we just simmer it down to CMMC. So it's just a kind of the gold standard for everyone to follow, right? To make everybody's lives easier. But if you're in a business and you're not regulated now, I actually find it hard to believe, because there's so many state and federal breach notifications and privacy laws. You may just not know that those laws exist. And then if you're handling certain types of data, like the whole reason why the FTC cracked down on car dealerships is because they were like, oh, all of our customers they want credit to buy a car, so there's so much personal information being given, and then there's handling of that sensitive information to protect the public. So that's where the whole FTC crackdown happened. And I think, again, it's for good. We're obviously in cyber and compliance, so we want to make it harder for cyber criminals to steal people's identities and cause a breach. But yeah, I think that the takeaway here is, even if you were to go to a financial, either a car dealership or a bank or wherever you're going, I'd still be pretty stingy on how you give your information and require evidence of protection of that information to protect yourself. Because if they're handling it sloppily, and what happens, you're the result of the breach, and then now you have your own cleanup to do to protect your own identity. So it's, the takeaways here are, we share this news and information, not just to kind of scare everybody, but just this is the world we live in. You just got to take matters into your own hands sometimes and embrace everything that you can that's trustless, and assume the worst. Assume that, people are spying on you and data mining points around you to maliciously put harm on you, either by social engineering and phishing and targeted attacks. Or there was another headline I saw around the data breach with LastPass. That was December of 22, and then just recently, I think it was just a few days ago, it was on October 25th, 25 different LastPass users lost more than $4 million worth of cryptocurrency. Now, my argument with that would be, yeah, they had a breach, but once the consumers and the public were notified of the breach, any people that were holding crypto especially, or any people that were affected for that matter, again, should have taken matters into their own hands, chose a different password manager, and changed their passwords. But these 25 people, and again, I'm not, pushing blame on people, but I'm just saying that it gets to a point where we have to take certain things into our own hands and do our own thing. These companies that get breached left and right, again, we're the victims, right? So assume the worst, assume all of our stuff is out there. What are we doing to monitor it? And what are we doing to protect it? And how do we make it, what actions can we do as a human and a consumer to make it more difficult for hackers to breach our identity or our systems?
Yeah, it's all about embracing the zero trust framework. Like another instance. I don't think I ever told you this, but I was importing something from abroad, and then I get a phone call, and it was FedEx or UPS or one of the, I can't remember which one, but they called me and they said, "Hey, are you Blake?" They're like, "Hey, yeah, we got your package here. What's your social security number?" And I'm like, they're like, "Oh, or tax ID number." Like, they didn't put that on there, And I'm like, okay, how do I know that you're from FedEx, And then of course they verified a bunch of stuff, like that it was a legitimate call, but immediately it's in a much.
I'm just quite surprised that you actually answered the phone. It's gotten so bad where I don't actually answer my phone live anymore unless I'm expecting the call for a meeting or something, or it's somebody that I know and trust. But if it's just a random caller, there's no way, because there's so many social engineering, smishing, phishing, all sorts of stuff.
I normally wouldn't have answered the call because, I typically will only answer phone numbers if they're from like my network or extended network. So in this case, it was
Right.
ironically a call from South Carolina. So I'm like, all right, like I have a California phone number. Like if somebody's calling from North Carolina or South Carolina, like they know who I am, like to a
Right.
degree, because I lived in North Carolina and South Carolina. So yeah, that was like the one reason why I answered it. So
Yeah. Um, well, that's crazy. I mean, that happens all the time. I get weird text messages. My wife showed me a text message that, was kind of similar to what you were just talking about a shipping or something. And she's like, "Is this legit?" And I looked at it up and I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Look at the phone number. It was like plus 60 something, different country." I'm like, "Absolutely not." you know, but it just puts so much pressure on us as everyday people. And we live and breathe this stuff, right, Blake? I mean, but imagine the people that do not, right? How hammered they are every day from every direction, whether it's phone calls, emails, text messages, or any other messaging, social apps, things like that. Again, the more you involve yourself in, the wider spread your attack surface is for you to get scammed, right? I think it's sad and unfortunate for these folks, that lost all this money, but I don't say any one layer's the cure all, but had they used Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, the software apps for one-time pins and passwords in addition to the password, I'm saying that's not an excuse. You should have changed your password, but again, adopting more layers, adopting more trustless systems. But it goes back to backups, right? I mean, we can't even get people to listen and back up their stuff, and they don't want to pay for it, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's too hard," or they don't want to pay the money to do it. But then they lose everything and they're like, "Oh crap, what does it cost for data recovery or whatever?" So it's like we all need to do more in educating ourselves and taking the security training that we talk about and the testing, and just keep doing better and putting more pressure on our vendors and demanding more evidence and pushing more back on these vendors to take security more seriously.
It all starts with like questioning yourself, right? Like, ask yourself the simple question, like, what is the worst thing that could happen to my business? Like, what is the worst thing? Like I would cease to operate if this happened. And then
But I don't think people want to see the reality of that, though. I think that they just don't think it's going to happen to them until it does. And then it's the old crap moment of, how do I get out of this?
I mean, it may not happen, but it doesn't cost anything for you to ask yourself that question. Like, hey, what would happen if this happened? And then you ask yourself, what am I doing to prevent this from happening?
Yeah.
Like what, and then you put your plan in place. Like, okay, well, if you have one single point of failure for all of your intellectual property, and your backups are in this service or that service, and if that you don't have anything backing up that service, and your whole company falls and uses that one service provider, and there's no redundancy, how can you implement redundancy? I mean, that's a simple question. It doesn't cost you anything to ask that. And then you start exploring the rabbit hole, right? Okay, well, if we're, here's how we implement backups for said service.
Well, it even goes back to your everyday life too. So like, who do you bank with? What happens if this bank goes out of business? Do you have money in another bank? Like FDIC insurance only protects you for a certain amount. If you're a business owner and you have more than that amount, how are you protecting yourself? Do you have multiple, but you know what I mean? Like it's redundancies in every part of our lives, I think. And I think that's a great point that you bring up. It's asking these difficult questions and taking whatever time it takes to just kind of chip away at it. And it's a snowball effect, and it's a lot of work, but it's planning, and it's preparing for the worst and in a layered, methodology.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple question. It costs nothing for you to think about it, right? A lot of people that you have resources here. Obviously, we're making podcasts. We like to give out free information, right? So you're more than welcome to pick up the phone and give us a ring, chat with me or Craig, about, disaster recovery options, or,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows, even a disaster recovery plan, right? If
Absolutely.
this happens, here's what we need to do, right? And that all it takes is you just saying, "Hey, I'm interested. Here's what I thought about, right? I thought here's where the weaknesses are in our
Yeah.
company." And it's really easy for you to spot it once you start framing it, right? It's all about the framing. Okay, here's our weak points. It doesn't take you paying somebody to tell you that to figure it out, because you live and breathe that organization every single day, those workflows, those practices.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy for you to look at it, right, from an internal perspective, and because you're familiar with the environment, to do a self-assessment of your business. It costs nothing,
Yeah. And then for the businesses that are more mid-market or more mature, then we can move into tabletop exercises with your team and test the plans that you have worked so hard to put in place, and see how effective they are, and if there's any gaps that need to be filled, or that constant drilling and testing is only going to make you faster, better, and stronger.
I think one thing I've noticed with a lot of people that I talk to, it's almost like they get embarrassed for having vulnerabilities, or they're it's almost like I don't know how to describe it. They feel like embarrassed. They're like, "Oh, I am doing this." Or anytime I've asked a question to somebody who I'm talking to, it's like automatically go into defensive mode.
Right.
And that to me is almost like, I wouldn't say like makes me think about their weaknesses even more, but yeah, every time we've asked these questions to clients that we work with, they automatically go into defensive. Well, I do this, I do that. It's like,
yeah, and I agree with that. I think that I think the takeaway is, we're not here to make you feel bad or shame you or put you down. We're here to help, right? And that's why we're doing these. That's why our phone number, our website, and you can reach out to us and get the help that you need. We're not going to be like, "Oh, you should have done this," or whatever. If there are gaps, we're going to show you what the gaps are, and you don't necessarily have to do all of them. You can hire somebody to do some of it for you, but somebody's got to do the jobs, right? And our job is to show your gaps and your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, and how look through the lens of a hacker, is what I've said before. How are you going to be viewed, or how are you viewed right now, and how much of a mark are you, and how easy of a target are you? And our job as your provider is to make you better and stronger and more safe, and leverage technology, some of which are free, and don't cost money. It's just a different methodologies and recipes of doing things. You'll get to a point where either your business is best served by you, and these kind of functions are better outsourced to professionals. But if you're super small and just starting out, maybe you do all of it yourself at the beginning. But it gets to a point in your growth and your maturity where you have to document your policies, procedures, and how you're going to respond to certain situations, so that your company can grow and have that strong foundation. So as you hire people and expand, you have a blueprint.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of companies now with digitization, like, data is the business model.
Yep.
Right? Like, we have clients that their whole business and all of their revenue comes from the data that they produce, that they share, and that they, publish, right? So if your business model is data driven, maybe you should look at it. But if you have a food truck and you're you don't take credit cards, you're all cash powered food truck, and you don't store any credit card information, or you don't get anybody's phone numbers or emails, or, I mean, it's obviously a different conversation, right? So, but yeah, the self kind of realization as to, hey, what is our revenue source? what does that come from? Like, what drives the revenue? If you're a medical debt collection company, and you're making calls left and right trying to collect debt or whatever, like the data is the revenue source, right?
Yeah.
There it is. So yeah, that self-realization has to happen. Don't be embarrassed, like there's nothing wrong with being uncompliant. I think the only thing that I think is wrong is once you realize that you're not doing the right thing and continue to ignore the right thing, that you're doing the wrong thing, that is when, obviously it's embarrassing, right? For your clients to know and find out. So once you realize you're doing the wrong thing, start doing the right thing. These are choices, right? That we make every single day. It's like, you can go make a cake and eat a whole cake, or you can go to the gym and eat, a plant-based diet or something. You know what I mean? Like we all know the right choices and they're right in front of us. It just starts with one foot in front of the next, like
small steps. Yep.
Yeah. It's just making the right choice at the right time. So being ignorant doesn't make it okay.
No, absolutely not. I think it almost makes it worse, because now you're holding information that is wrong and what you need to do. And then it's like, all right, take action, start today, chip away at it. It's not going to happen overnight, and just keep working towards the end, and once you get there, it's a continuous effort to keep yourself secure and compliant. However, if you've got all the big work done and you've climbed the mountain, it becomes easier.
Yeah, it's easier to go down the mountain than it is to go back up it, you know? So once you've reached and summited that mountain, not saying you have to go down on your cybersecurity, but it's easier, the uphill battle, right?
But I think the takeaway is, not only does this stuff that we're talking about make your business and yourselves more secure, but if you're in business to profit and make money, it gives you that foundational layer to build on. When you start a business, you can be just you and do what you want and try to do everything yourself. And that's fine. People do that, but you're going to hit a ceiling. There's going to be a point in time where it's either too much work, or you need to expand, or you need to bring on somebody and hire and expand. And if you truly want to be able to take back control of your time and be able to expand, you need to hire good people, and then you need to train those people, and then follow the policies and procedures and the methodology that you put in place for your company. And then that's the kind of the maturity ladder. As you become more and more mature, it becomes easier to expand because you have the blueprint. And it, like I said, the hard work, the heavy lifting, it's been done, and it's almost like maintenance mode, right? Like you brought the good point around exercise. Typically, people that don't exercise, really hard to go to the gym, right? And then it takes, a good 2 to 4 weeks of going consistently to really break through that psychological and emotional barriers, on a health level, to change that habit, the bad habits, right? And then once you do it often enough, then you actually look forward to it, and it actually becomes somewhat enjoyable. And then you're mad when you miss a day, kind of thing. So, but in order to break through, and that's different for everybody, but my point is, in order to break through that, it's just like anything else. You have to break through that habit, and you have to be persistent, and you have to keep chipping away at it and keep trying, keep working, and eventually it'll pay off.
That's it. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yep, agreed. Well, thank you guys. Have a great day.
As always, we'll talk soon.
Take care.
See you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Cybersecurity and Compliance Podcast with Craig Petronella. For other episodes and more information, visit petronellatech.com. Also visit our other websites, compliancearmor.com and blockchainsecurity.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and stay secure.